Good morning, everyone. This is Mark Molina, CEO of Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. I'm very excited to start a three-part series this week on the mental health challenges, issues, and concerns facing our community in this pandemic and the struggles that we're facing on a human level that are facing our families, our children, our communities, our nation, and the entire global community. And I think this is a relevant conversation for the very challenges that we're facing. This morning, our first guest is Patricia Hasbach, PhD. She is a volunteer. She's in practice for herself. I'll get to her bio in just a moment. But she's a board member and a volunteer locally for the Center for Community Counseling. And I'm very excited to learn that we have such qualified experts in our local community. And we have this organization, Center for Community Counseling, available to the citizens locally here in Lane County and with the entire surrounding area. So thank you for being here. And her bio, I think, is very important. I'm going to read the bio that's been provided, and I want to establish her expertise. I want to establish her skill set. I want to establish her achievements and her education, because I think it's important right now, with all the things being presented on Facebook and in social media, that we understand that we are talking to experts, especially in the arena of mental health. So Dr. Hasbach is the founder of Northwest Ecotherapy. The website, I want to start with this because if you have time after this presentation, I will mention it again. I've read your website. It was very intriguing, and I have some questions for you later on in this hour. Her work can be found at www.northwestecotherapy.com. Dr. Hasbach is a licensed psychotherapist, consultant, author, and college educator in Eugene, Oregon. She has been in private practice for over 28 years. Dr. Hasbach offers therapy and counseling services to adults, couples, families, and groups. Areas of specialty include relationship issues, health concerns, life transitions, career issues, and managing anxiety and depression. She has been a pioneer in the practice of ecotherapy, a method of treatment that recognizes the healing benefits of interactions with nature. She consults with hospitals, schools, businesses, police departments and correction facilities, architecture design, and land use planning firms and community environmental groups. Dr. Hasbach is an author and co-editor of 2 MIT Press books, Ecopsychology, The Science of Totems and the Technological Species, and The Rediscovery of the Wild. Her book, Ecopsychology, was nominated for the 2014, is that Grawemeyer, did I say that right? Grawemeyer Award in Psychology, which recognizes outstanding ideas in psychology and makes them available to a wide audience. She has published numerous book chapters and professional journal articles and is a guest blogger for the international online forum, the Children in Human Network. Her work has been cited in Rich Love's, is that correct, Rich Love's? Rich Lou's book, Our Wild Calling, The Nature Principle, and Vitamin N, and in several popular and professional magazines, including Outside Magazine, Time Magazine, Vogue, the New York Times Sunday Magazine, Sierra Magazine, the Psychotherapy Network, the Utne Reader, the Christian Science Monitor, the Observer, which is a publication by the Association of Psychological Science, and the Monitor, which is a publication of the American Psychological Association, and Counseling Today, which is a publication of the American Counseling Association. She is a member of the editorial board for the peer-reviewed journal Ecopsychology. Dr. Hasbach teaches in the Graduate School of Education and Counseling, Department of Counseling Psychology at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, and is the co-director of the Ecopsychology Certificate Program. She was a co-PI on a research project that examined the impacts of showing nature imagery to inmates in solitary confinement in an Oregon prison. Known as the Blue Room, this project was named by Time Magazine as one of the 25 best innovations of 2014. Findings from this research were presented in the American Psychological Association Annual Convention in 2016 and were published in Frontiers in Ecology and the Environment in 2017. Dr. Hasbach, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's really important to begin to have conversations, normalizing conversations around the very real issues of the mental health challenges that our communities are facing. And I want to begin to have those conversations right now because it's really, really important. So I'd like to open this up to your expertise, to your knowledge, to the work that you do, your life work, on how or what should we begin talking about right now?
Well, I want to really thank you for creating this series, Mark. I think we really need, as a community, all of the kinds of resources we can find for people to access, to say, how do I get through this time? This is a challenging time for everyone. And normalizing some of the very difficult emotions that people have about this difficult time is really important. So people are going to access different ways of getting information. Facebook is one of the ways, as you mentioned, people do search for information about what should I do, how do I feel, does anybody have any ideas about coping, that kind of thing. So to bring forward a kind of a global issue and then being able to kind of funnel it down to how in our local community it's getting addressed and what are some resources for people is really important. So all of us at the Center for Community Counseling really appreciate you including the center in this series and being able to talk about that. My colleagues from the center will be following me in, I guess, subsequent interviews. Our clinical program manager, Naseem May, will be sharing some specifics about some of the services that the Center for Community Counseling are offering now via online video conferencing, and we'll be again offering in person as soon as we can again at our location on Coburg Road. And then John Davies, Dr. John Davies, another board member, will be talking a little bit about how men in particular are responding to some of the special challenges that we're all facing. And John directs our men's center at the Center for Community Counseling and has a long history of working with men in the male population. So he'll be a great addition to this discussion. But I think, to begin, it's probably really important to just maybe name what are some of the challenges that people are facing right now. We have a pretty good handle on what are some of the physical challenges and what are some of the physical symptoms and concerns that we need to be aware of that's related to COVID-19. We have less of a discrete understanding, or certainly it's talked about less in terms of what some of the psychological challenges are of the pandemic that we're all facing. So if you would like, I could maybe just start and talk a little bit about that part of it.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. I think one of the things that is important to say is that coping with a global pandemic is new territory for all of us.
Yes.
And we humans don't do well with uncertainty. We like to have a goal and head in that direction. And when it is unclear how to deal with the uncertainty, it raises strong feelings. Some of the feelings most often described is fear and anxiety. And that's understandable. Fear about contracting the virus is central. Fear of understanding how is it relayed between and among people. And as we get more information about that, we're maybe lessening our fear a little bit about that and being able to do something about it. And one of the things that we're doing about it is social distancing. And that creates its own sort of uh, uh, scenario of emotions, what it's like to be social distancing. Um, and I think it's important also to, every time I'm talking about things that are challenging, I also try to help people reframe a little bit about how can we see this a little bit differently. So as I go along and talk about these, I'll acknowledge that here's some of the common emotions that we're feeling. Here's some things that are indicators that we're struggling with it, and then here's some possible coping strategies, as well as ways of maybe reframing some of this.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I like to think about, and when I'm talking about this, is positive reframing about where the sense of isolation that many people feel when we're social distancing or staying at home by ourselves. And it's related to this idea of pandemic, that it is a global issue. It's something that everyone, no matter our socioeconomic level, no matter our geographic location, no matter whether we're an urbanite, a suburbanite, living in a rural community, everybody is dealing with this in our own unique ways. And those different settings present different challenges, obviously. And some people are having an easier time with this than others. But a positive reframing is that I'm not alone in this. Everybody on the planet, everybody in my community is dealing with this new reality that we have an active pandemic happening. And as I said, it's new for all of us. Another positive reframing about staying at home. I can't tell you over the years how many times I've heard my clients say, I wish I had more time. I wish I had more time at home. I wish I had more time with my kids. I wish I had more time to pursue a hobby or learn something new. And I've said it myself for sure. This can be, for some people, that opportunity to reframe this time at home, to pursue some of those things that they might not have been able to do. I know on a personal level, my garden is going to look better this year than it has in years.
I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yes. Getting outside, getting my hands in the dirt, spending a little bit of focused time has been helpful for me, as part of a coping mechanism for me. So this idea of just reframing some of these things in a more positive way. But let's go back and talk about, I think, one of the most common emotions that research is suggesting that people are feeling, and that's fear and anxiety.
Yes.
And I mentioned the fear about contracting the virus, the fear about being able to obtain life's necessities. We're seeing on the news the long lines that some people are in at food banks. We're seeing people standing outside of grocery stores or Walmarts and Costco's because they're limiting the number of people that can come into the store for safety reasons. And we're seeing the pictures of, certain sections of the grocery store being sold out of something at a given time, and the concern about the supply stream of goods and services that we need. Everything from fresh produce and eggs to toilet paper. And so people have fear and anxiety when they experience that firsthand, or even when they're just seeing it on the news and wondering, can that happen here too? Fear about taking time off of work or not being able to work because their company or their business has closed. Because by order of the social distancing, the financial strain is very real.
Yes.
For people. And many people, even people who have planned and have some little nest egg in the bank, are really feeling the anxiety about how long is this going to last? How long am I going to be out of work? Am I going to be able to get what I need for myself and my family? People who have never had to be in line at a food bank are now.
Yes.
So the anxiety of the doing of that, or the anxiety of worrying about, am I going to have to do that in the future,
Mm-hmm.
is very real for people. Um, Another anxiety is being unable to care for some of the people we love most dearly, our extended family, particularly our elders. If we have a family member in an assisted living situation or a nursing home or hospital and we can't be with them, that is a huge anxiety for
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I have some clients that have family members that live in another state. They really can't travel there to check on them as regularly as they would like. They're concerned because we know the elderly people are among the most vulnerable to get the virus. So people are really, really worried about extended family and others that they care about who are in very vulnerable situations. Um, some of the manifestations of anxiety that happen, I should say, that are common things that people might not necessarily relate to anxiety. Having trouble sleeping,
Yes.
having trouble maybe going to sleep or staying asleep
Mm-hmm.
is a common manifestation of anxiety. Having difficulty concentrating and focusing on a task. It can lead us to feeling kind of forgetful,
Mm-hmm.
like, why did I come in this room? What did I come in here for? Or if we are working from home, being able to stay focused on our task. We run out of patience quicker,
Yes.
anxious. So if our children are at home and they're particularly needy right now because their lives are turned upside down too, their schedule's different, we might find our patience are a little bit shortened,
Mm-hmm.
and anxiety can be a contributing factor to that. I'm sure you've heard some things from folks around how they're experiencing anxiety.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot. Well, just for instance, I'll start with myself and my family. Our 7-year-old daughter, she was cried a lot. She finally started telling us, not initially, but after the first couple of weeks of not being in school, she was angry. She was mad. She was mad that this was happening, mad she couldn't see her teacher. She missed her teacher. Then she was crying a lot. She didn't understand why she couldn't go to school, see her friends.
Yeah.
And I'm in my final class of the academic portion of a master's degree, and I haven't been able to pick up my book.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to do any of my work. I haven't picked up I had just started acoustical guitar lessons. I haven't picked up my guitar. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to read my book. Now I'm having to homeschool our daughter in
Yes.
the midst of trying to, do this. My wife's working. She has her own law practice, so she's always working, trying to keep that alive. And so just for us, feeling that constant, I'm a former soldier. I have survival training. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I can do this. And then all of a sudden it was like, but who's my enemy? All of a sudden my mind started, okay, but who's my enemy and how do I identify them? And how do I protect myself? I mean, I can tell you, I stood outside thinking these things. How do I
Yes.
protect myself? How do I protect my family? Who's my enemy? What, all of a sudden my mind started racing. What's the avenues of advance? Where would they come from? And all of a sudden I was like, man, am I losing my mind? Why are all these old this military training just coming back to me?
Yes.
And so, and then hearing just from people, they can't leave their house. They don't want to leave their house. They're mad. They're angry. They can't work. People are still waiting for their unemployment checks. 3,
Yes.
4, 5 weeks later, they've got no money coming in.
Yes.
It's the list goes on.
Yes, exactly. It's overwhelming when we're getting it from all sides. And what happens is, you just mentioned, you would go back to some old coping skills. And as a military person, you have a lot of coping skills kind of drilled in there. And we go back to that, but it raises that question, who is the enemy? And, a virus is this unseen enemy. And what do we do to protect ourselves? And people can get very fearful about that. You mentioned anger and your daughter feeling angry that she can't go back to school, or I think that's another very important emotion that we need to talk about is anger and frustration.
Yes.
And that loss of personal freedom, associated with isolation and social distancing, really does produce a lot of frustration for people. Feelings of anger and resentment at those who ordered the ordered the social distancing.
Yes.
Manifest. We saw that in some demonstrations last week in our country about let me go back to work, and trying to find that fine line between addressing public health issues and economic issues is certainly the big challenge that our country is facing right now. But on a micro scale, on our personal scale, we're facing it as well. How do I deal with the economic side of my family, and how do I deal with the personal safety and health of my family? And you just described the perfect microcosm here, where your wife is going to her office trying to maintain her practice and deal with some of the economic side of things. You're doing your work from home, trying to maintain economic side of things. And then we're also looking at how do we have our children at home too.
Yes.
So we're parenting at home and dealing with the emotions that children have. So we have something called role overload, when we have too many roles that we're trying to play at one time, and they're overlapping a lot. That can produce a lot of irritability. It can produce shortness of patience. It can produce anxiety. And how do we cope with some of that? Another way that I have heard people talk about the irritability and the frustration come up is that we do have this loss of our sense of agency, our sense of being able to fix it. Who's the enemy? How do I address it? How can we fix this problem? And I would guess a lot of your listeners in particular are business leaders and community leaders who are very used to being able to fix things. There's a problem, they're problem solvers, and they work at fixing it. When something like a global pandemic happens, no one person can fix it. We are all interdependent on each other like we have never been.
Yes.
To try to fix and address this problem. And it's going to take time, which also adds to that frustration. It's not an easy fix. I'm heartened to see news stories locally of what some people are doing to try to, in their own microcosm, contribute in a way that they feel like their agency is being restored. So people who are using their business as a place to be able to collect food and give out food to people, people who are volunteering at the pop-up food bank locations that are happening, looking at what can I do in my community to help. And I think that's one of our coping mechanisms too. It's not only the altruism that comes through of who we are, but it also is a way of restoring some sense of agency. Even as we help our children, sitting with them, mustering all the patience we can, and talking with them about helping them understand that this is a big problem and there are lots of people working on this problem, helping to allay their fears and anxiety, helping them to know that we're doing all we can to stay safe. I saw some pictures that children drew that were thank you pictures that they were putting in their windows as where hospital workers drove by. And that gives children something that they can give back to. Asking children within the home to take on some little responsibility in the family that's new is
Mhm.
a way to help them have a sense of agency, like maybe helping with preparing some dinner or helping them, clean up their room and make their bed or take care of, feed the dog, something like that, depending on your child's age and so forth. But all of those things as a parent helps us restore our agency too,
Mhm.
sense of agency.
I think that's critical. I want to just make a comment regarding role overload that I received an email from the school, my daughter's school, and they've done a good job. They've done a really good job of getting everything on the internet and with different software programs. But I just was at a place where I couldn't take one more thing, and I sent them an email, and I kind of smiled, but I'm a little embarrassed now when I think about it. But I said, well, what if I don't do this? You're the teacher, not me. This is your job, not mine. I'm
Mhm.
trying to keep my family safe, and now you're telling me that it's my job to make sure my daughter meets the state requirements for the education
Mhm.
requirements from the governor. I don't see that as my problem. I see that as your problem. So what if
Mhm.
I don't do it? That's what I tell them in the email. I said, I'm not trying to provoke you. This is just where I'm at. And if you really want my support, you're gonna have to give me a really good reason why this has anything to do with me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so they did reach out, and we were able to have some conversations and kind of work through that, and
Yeah.
it was very helpful. But I was at that place of role overload. Now I have, on top of everything else, now I've got to make sure that my daughter passes first grade.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. And I think you're not alone in that. I think a lot of parents are feeling a great deal of stress about how do I help my kids finish the school year?
Mm-hmm.
How do I work with the school to make this a productive time for my kids? Um, and the schools, I think the teachers too, are not prepared
Yeah.
for putting all of their curriculum and teaching online at any level, whether it's at the preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, and university level. Um, you read in my bio that I teach at Lewis and Clark College, and I was supposed to teach this spring, and the graduate course I was teaching really helps students um, learn about incorporating some elements of nature into the therapeutic process. So it entails them being outdoors and being outdoors together, practicing with each other. So it involves face-to-face time. And we ended up having to postpone that class
Mm-hmm.
until the fall because it was not one that we could transfer and put online. And I've heard from a number of colleagues how challenging that has been for them that have classes that are perhaps a little more traditionally based classes and they're being asked for the first time that they have to put their work online and learn how to teach online.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have at Lewis and Clark in my department, we didn't have any online classes. So everybody was feeling that same press of, oh, now I have to do this on top of everything else. So it's coming from both sides, the educators side and the student side in terms of university and high school, and then parents side for younger children. It's a time that we're being asked to do a lot. And when we're already being asked to deal with so much from a financial point of view, from a social distancing point of view, having the isolation piece added in, it really, that mix is quite challenging
Mm-hmm.
emotionally for all of us.
Well, it helped me to have had a phone conversation with my daughter's teacher,
Yeah.
because she was sharing with me that she was in exactly the same place I was. Everything that you just said, she had never had to teach online. She didn't know how to make the video, even how to get it online, and trying to make sure that it met the criteria for the state, that it had the necessary content. Where did we leave off in the education process with the children? And so hearing her struggle made me realize that, okay, she's not trying to, they're not trying to hurt me by making me do this.
Right,
You know,
right. And it's not just you
right.
having that feeling of overwhelm,
Yes.
that probably most other parents who got that letter had a similar reaction. And the teacher responsible for helping to get your child through this year too is having a similar kind of thing.
Yes.
Uh,
So it was
yeah,
meaningful to have that conversation, and even more meaningful to hear that, Mark, it's not just you. All the parents are trying to figure this out. I was happy to hear that it wasn't just my family struggling, that all the other parents were beginning to comment,
yes,
so and so isn't cooperating, we can't seem to figure it out, we're all confused. And it wasn't just around the academic, it was just the entire picture of what
yes.
everyone was going through.
Yes, yes, yes. And you make a really important point, having the conversation, you know,
Mhm.
connecting in terms of relationship.
Yes.
That's what's going to get us through this. You know, is the education process going to be perfect at this point? No, it's not, at any level. It's true with every other profession. In my field, um, I'm still seeing my patients, but I'm doing it just like we're doing this.
Mhm.
It's an online video conferencing, or it's by phone for some of the patients who don't feel comfortable or can't figure out, or don't have the skills to use the computer to be
Mhm.
able to do the video conferencing, or just prefer to do it by phone. They're comfortable with that. And I'll do however they want to do it because I don't want to add to their anxiety.
Mhm.
But I have done some of this work in the past because I have some people from a distance that I was working with, and they moved and they want to continue the work and so forth. But to have my whole spectrum of people, all the people that I see, and do it online, and having to update informed consent forms and understand what platforms we can use for HIPAA and which ones we can't. Those kinds of things were issues that had to get addressed within just a few days in
Yes.
order to be able to um, get things in a place that would be workable for everybody and meet the criteria, as you say. It's very stressful. But I think about looking back at that, several weeks ago now, and look how far we have come. And having those relationships again, being able to talk with someone about it is so important. I think, I'm sure we heard this long before the pandemic happened. One of the big stressors that people have is getting caught in the phone loops when you're calling a business and trying to get something fixed, particularly related to technology, and you just get caught in one of these phone loops and you can't
Yes.
speak with somebody, and how that heightens our anxiety, and it very quickly moves to anger and frustration.
Mhm.
And so being able to remember that as a good coping skill, when we start to cross that line of being anxious, from being kind of anxious about it to being angry, being able to take a step back and ask ourselves that question: what am I really angry at right now?
Mhm.
How do I not have to go there for myself?
Mhm.
That's a really important coping skill. The other piece that I thought that you mentioned, I thought was really important to revisit, was you said, I'm having a hard time even picking up my book for class or my guitar to practice. I'm having a hard time doing those things that I typically done in the past.
Mhm.
And I think, again, it says a little bit about we have a finite amount of energy and focus time,
Mhm.
and being kind of gentle with ourselves to say, what are those things that I have to temporarily set aside for now? Um, and what does it mean to me to have to do that?
I think it's important that's a very important point, because we all have those things, I think, in particular here in North America, where we have to constantly be on a path to success. We constantly have to have goals we have to be striving for, especially if you're guilty of high achieving, or maybe a person struggles with perfectionism. I had been on the path with my master's degree that I was about 8 months ahead to be completed with it, getting up for the last 2 years, 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning every morning to get all my work done, because I had a full-time job and all of those other things. And then this happens and I just shut down.
Yeah.
Patricia, I shut down. I haven't wanted to read the book. It's there. I have one last chapter to read and to then start the work. And I'm like, I can't do it. Just my mind is with just so much mental energy. I want to make sure the kitchen's clean, you know, little things like that I can see immediate success. Like you have the sense of normalcy.
Yes.
That the world really isn't, the world might be falling apart out there, but right here, we're safe, we're okay, the dishes are clean. My wife's been, making big meals and, that kind of stuff, making sure we're okay. And
Yes.
it's a unique thing to me, because I haven't been in that. I can't remember the last time I felt so lost and helpless.
Okay. Yes. And I think, again, you're not alone in that. I've had a lot of people tell me that they're cleaning out closets. I found myself the other day here. I'm in my home office, obviously, and I have a desk here that I've worked at it many years. And I was looking for something the other morning in a hurry, and I couldn't find it in this top drawer of my desk. You know how we always have one of those drawers where pens and everything tends to be. And I had pulled out about 4 pens, and they wouldn't write. I thought, okay, I'm cleaning out this desk drawer, and emptied the desk drawer. And it's the first time, I'm sure, in a number of years, this desk drawer has been cleaned out. And I had to chuckle to myself when I opened it again later in the day, and it looked so nice. And I thought, okay, what else was going on besides the pens wouldn't write?
Right.
It's trying to establish that sense of order, that sense of I have some agency in this realm of my life. So what you just shared, the kitchen was clean, the meals are, really healthy meals that are getting put on the table. I'm doing what I can do. And give yourself that. Allow a little bit of deep breath about that. I am doing what I can do. And be a little bit gentle with the expectations that we have of ourselves right now when we can do that. There are so many have-tos that are there. And if we have something we can put on hold for a little bit, do that. The other piece is when we do have a task that we need to get to, like maybe you really do need to read that last chapter in that book. One of the ways of maybe approaching that when we feel like it's just overwhelming is just say, I'm going to read just the first section of that chapter, or I'm going to read the first 2 pages of that chapter and call it good. And we break down a larger task into smaller, more manageable bites. That's another way of coping with anxiety. We break it down into smaller, manageable bites, whatever is, the focus of our difficulty at that moment.
I told my wife the other day, we were talking, and I said, I think it's important that I say this, because people that might be having these same emotions, and this is what this is about. It's about mental health. These discussions are about some of the things, people are experiencing. And I told her, I felt like I could just lay down and not move anymore forever. And I didn't know where that came from, but it just, the sense of helplessness, like, I can't take care of you. I can't take care of my family. I can't find toilet paper. I can't teach my daughter. I was just going through this enormous range of powerful emotions. I just wanted to lay down and not have to get back up.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure your viewers can relate to feeling that way in moments, and maybe in more than moments, maybe in longer periods of time. When we feel so out of control of our life, we can have that sense of helplessness. And it's a form of depression.
Yes.
It can be a fleeting depression, a shorter term depression, or it can be a depression that stays with us. And if we have a tendency to have depression, it can exacerbate that. It can make it, that can be a place we get stuck. Same thing with anxiety. For folks who may have a tendency to be a bit anxious, this time might really tweak that, and that's where they go. That's the emotion that they might get stuck in a little bit. So depression is one of those really strong emotions that can come up during times like this, where there are a number of things out of our control. Being unable to work, or being unable to perform some of the meaningful activities that is traditionally part of our life, feels like a huge loss. And with that, can result in feelings of a loss of purpose, or feelings of sadness. Extended time alone.
Yes.
I think about people who aren't with their families, or who don't have a family to be with, or people who are maybe sitting in an apartment by themselves, who can't even get outside easily with the social distancing piece. That can lead to feelings of boredom for some people, and with that, over time, can really contribute to a sense of loneliness. All of those kinds of things can take us down that path of feelings of depression.
Well, I like what you said about the incremental aspect of accomplishment. That right now, just take it. When you said that about just go home and read maybe a couple of pages, maybe one page, maybe the first two paragraphs, I thought immediately, I felt like, okay, I can do that. I can go home and I can, at a minimum, I can read at least the first two paragraphs of the first page of the last chapter, and then I'll worry about two more paragraphs tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, great. I do think that is a really good coping skill under any circumstances. When we are anxious, or we feel like we have an awful lot on our plate, and yet there's something gnawing at us to say, oh, I need to get to this, I need to get to this, I need to get to this. And saying, okay, I can't get to the whole, maybe 50 pages of the chapter. I can't concentrate that much right now. But can I break it down? So looking at tasks that we can put into more manageable bites, I would really think is important, especially now where we have so much going on. It's something that we can also help our kids with. Because remember, this online learning is new for them too.
Yes.
And it's probably not going all that easily for many kids at home. And parents are struggling with trying to help them do it. And everybody's saying, okay, let's just see if we can get this up and on, and let's get through this first little section. And then, take a break, call it good for a little while, and then come back to it. So we're teaching children some important coping skills, and all of this is helping with resilience. These are skills that help us be resilient people. It helps our children grow into resilient adults, to have these little skills with us that we can draw on when we need to. I'm sure when you were in the military and in some pretty tough spots, as you shared with me at another time, there were skills that you had to learn that allowed you to stay resilient, and be able to be fully present to when you had to be.
I think that's really important what you just said about resiliency, and I think it's important that we make that a part of our our paradigm right now in every area. We must find and develop that sense of resiliency, because this will be a life story for us, our families, our friends, our children, our communities, our nation, and the world. This will be a lifelong. This isn't just the Great Depression isolated to the US.
Right.
Both my parents were Depression era babies. I remember all the stories from my grandmother, what it was like trying to feed their family and survive.
Yes.
But this is going to be a long-term story for all of us. And I feel even, it's hard for me not to cry listening to you talk about our children, because we're, as parents, we're all struggling with how to help them and make sure that they're okay when you're not feeling okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's okay to share with our kids that this is hard for me too.
Hmm.
You know, because it says to them, it's, you know, we're showing our emotion in an appropriate way to our kids, that, you know, I'm concerned about this too, or I'm not sure how to make this computer thing work for our class either, and I'm gonna help you work through it. Um, I'm scared sometimes too. I think it's really important that we are able to say in an age appropriate way to our children, that the emotions that they have are emotions similar to something that we have. And we're modeling that with them. And again, I think owning our feelings, not being ashamed of our feelings, um, recognizing it's part of our humanness. And we are all globally experiencing this in our own ways, given our own circumstances.
Hmm.
And children learn so much about, is it okay to feel this way? Is
Yeah.
it okay to be sad? Is it okay to be angry? Is it okay to be scared? We learn so much from our immediate world. So it's often our parents, or maybe our extended family, that whoever's in that household, people that they're exposed to regularly. And how do we help them be strong? How do we help them be resilient? Um, and reiterating to them some things that have helped us stay strong can be very much teachable moments right now. I had someone share with me last week that they had started a journal at the beginning of this. And they said, I'm just keeping a journal of what each day is like, what I'm hearing on the news, how I'm responding to it, what I'm doing in my personal world to cope. Because as you just shared, you know, this is a life story. This is not something that, you know, too many people today have ever experienced. Although I heard on the news there was someone who was 107 years old who had some memory of the Spanish flu and what happened during that time. And so for her, there was a legacy piece about this that she wanted to write down for her grandchildren who were very young. So she wasn't caught in that moment right now as you and other young families are, of having to do homeschooling at home with children and provide for kids and your family and that sort of thing. She was somebody who is um, older, living alone, and trying to find meaning in this experience. And for her, she was documenting
Oh,
what
good.
the experience was. It was a legacy piece that she wanted to be able to write for her children and her grandchildren. So finding meaning in what we're doing. You
Mhm.
mentioned your wife was cooking big meals, and we see a lot of jokes about people coming out at the other end of this, and they've all gained about 20 pounds because the refrigerator's right there. But I also think people are eating better.
Yeah.
People are taking the time to cook and taking the time to dig up old family recipes or making comfort food
Mhm.
for themselves and for their family. It's meaningful. It's meaningful work. Taking care of those we love, feeding people that we love.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
So as we wrap up this last 10 minutes or so, we've talked about a lot of things today. for someone that's listening to this, they sit back and say, okay, I've got a lot of this stuff going on in me. I got a lot of this stuff going on in my spouse or my children or my immediate family. Now what do I do? Now that I recognize it, now that I'm aware of it, now what?
Yeah. So some coping strategies to think about. And we've mentioned a few
Mm-hmm.
here. One is really trying to have conversation with those that we might be struggling with, like you mentioned, between you and the teacher and how that helped in terms of understanding. Having meaningful conversation with our significant others or our children or other important people in our life, checking in on them. So that's one coping skill. Another coping skill is really maintaining that healthy lifestyle that you talked about, that you alluded to. Maintaining a daily routine is part of a healthy lifestyle. So getting up at the same time and going to bed at a regular time is really important, not only for our physical health, but for our mental health. Trying to get good sleep as best we can at night and maintaining a routine. I often say to people to get dressed in the morning like you would normally. It's nice to be comfortable at home, but also being able to just take care of oneself. Get your shower, do your hair, get some clothes on that make you feel like I'm alive and part of, it helps us get motivated and have different energy to do what we need to do in the day. Eating healthy food, drinking plenty of water, getting regular exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important. We know it's important for our physical health. It is very important for our mental health to get regular exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and preferably outdoors. Now, that's easier for some than for others. But even if we can just go out and walk around our yard or go out and walk around the neighborhood, keeping our 6-foot distance from other people. We know that it's safer to exercise outdoors, even if there's other people around, because of airflow.
Mm-hmm.
It's less likely that we're going to have a problem in terms of encountering the virus. But we also know that green exercise, from a mental health point of view, is even more effective than exercising indoors. You mentioned eco-psychology in my introduction, and part of that is really looking at that very concern of that human and natural world relationship, and recognizing we are part of the natural world. The world is bigger than just we humans. And when we can stop and connect with that greater than human world, it also does a lot to combat that sense of loneliness or that sense of aloneness. At my home office here, I have a lot of windows that look out into my little garden, and I've got a bird feeder and a hummingbird feeder and a bird bath. And I get a lot of pleasure in watching birds, but it's also a wonderful mental health break from the focused attention that I'm doing when I'm working with someone or doing an interview or working on a paper. Taking those mental health breaks and connecting with nature is really important. So we have lots of good studies that help us understand that exercising outdoors and kind of connecting all of our senses is really important. When I'm in here, I'm really using my sense of sight to enjoy the birds. If I open the window, I get to smell the fresh air or feel the air differently. If I get outside, I have it even more directly. Hearing the natural world around us, hearing the wind through the trees, hearing bird sound, all of those kinds of things can go a very long way at diminishing anxiety and depression. And not just because it sounds good, but because now we have the good science behind it that also shows that as well. So I really emphasize that, folks.
If someone wanted to reach out and get a hold of you or the Center for Community Counseling to talk about resources, support, how would they do that?
Okay, great question. Thank you for asking that. The Center for Community Counseling, we can take a look at their website, which is ccceugene.org. And if someone wanted to connect with me at my private practice, it's www.northwestecotherapy.com. There's contact page on both of those websites that people could connect with and reach out.
This is a very wonderful interview. I'm so grateful for your time. It's just a reminder, you have such a gentle approach, and I can see how your clients would respond as they have so wonderfully to you. So I just really want to thank you for your life work.
Oh, thank you.
Your willingness to participate. Any final words of encouragement you'd like to say to anyone who will watch this interview?
I think the most important thing for people hearing this interview is recognizing they aren't alone.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of aloneness really can be devastating for people. And there are resources in the community to reach out to. And that's our human connection. And then the connection with the greater than human world of being able to even open your window or go out on your porch or your deck or take a walk in your yard if you have a yard to walk in, and just open your senses. Mm-hmm. It allows our mind to quiet. It allows our breath to quiet. It allows us to kind of recalibrate and settle. And it helps to foster that sense of resilience that we all need right now.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So for those that are watching, I remind you we have with us Patricia Hasbach, PhD. She's a board member and volunteer for Center for Community Counseling. You can find her there or at her website as mentioned. We thank you for your time, and we're looking forward to your colleagues and their presentations for this work as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark.
Yes, ma'am.
Take good care. Be safe.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.